I don't even know how to begin this. I've been lurking on Reddit for years, reading other people's confessions, heartbreaks, and wild stories, always thinking, that could never be me. My life has always felt normal. Stable. Boring, even. I was the kind of person who found comfort in routines, the morning coffee, the quiet drive to work, the predictable texts from my partner, Jamie, around lunchtime. We'd been together for almost a decade, married for 6 years. We had our quirks and rough patches, like any couple, but there was always this underlying trust, a sense that we were facing life together, side by side. Now, I'm sitting here in our living room, staring at the faint outline of Jamie's keys on the entryway table, and I feel like my entire reality has been ripped away. I keep replaying the past 2 years in my head, looking for cracks, warning signs, anything that could explain how I missed something so huge. But the truth is, I didn't see it coming. Not even close. It started, as these things often do, with something small. 2 weeks ago, I was cleaning out the guest room closet, looking for an old photo album for Jamie's mom's birthday. I found a stack of envelopes tucked behind a box of Christmas decorations, pay stubs, but they were all dated from over 2 years ago. The most recent one was from February 2023. At first, I thought Jamie had just switched to digital pay stubs, or maybe the company changed their payroll system. But then I noticed the company logo. It was the same one Jamie's worked at since we moved to this city. The same job Jamie left for every morning at 8:15, lunch packed, tie straightened, a quick kiss goodbye. I didn't say anything right away. I'm not a confrontational person. I told myself there must be a reasonable explanation. Maybe there was a side job, or Jamie was working from home more than I realized because of the pandemic and just didn't mention it. Or maybe I was overthinking everything, letting my imagination run wild. But the seed was planted. I started paying closer attention. I noticed little things. Jamie never talked about work anymore. No funny stories about coworkers, no rants about the boss, nothing about projects or deadlines. When I asked how work was, the answers were always vague. Busy. Same old, same old. I chalked it up to stress. Maybe Jamie was just burned out. Then, last Tuesday, I had to come home early from work. My boss sent everyone home after a pipe burst in the building. I didn't call Jamie, wanting to surprise them with lunch from their favorite Thai place. When I pulled into the driveway, Jamie's car was already there. My heart did a weird little jump, but I convinced myself they must be sick or working from home. I walked in quietly, expecting to find Jamie on a Zoom call in the office. Instead, I found Jamie sitting on the couch in their pajamas, TV on, surrounded by empty coffee mugs and a half-eaten bowl of cereal. They looked up, startled, like a deer caught in headlights. "Oh, hey," Jamie said, trying to smile. "You're home early." I stood there, Thai food in hand, suddenly aware of how strange this all was. Jamie never worked from home. Their job was in logistics, warehouse management, lots of hands-on work. I asked if they were sick. Jamie shrugged, mumbled something about feeling off, and changed the subject. That's when it clicked. The pay stubs, the silence about work, the car always being in the same spot when I left in the morning and when I came home. I felt this cold, sinking feeling in my gut. That night, after Jamie went to bed, I started searching for more clues. I checked our bank statements. For the past 2 years, Jamie's paychecks had been direct deposits from a savings account, not from their employer. All the while, I'd been depositing my own checks into our joint account, never questioning why Jamie's always came from the same place. I guess I trusted them so completely that it never occurred to me to look closer. I didn't sleep at all that night. My mind raced with possibilities. Had Jamie lost their job and was too ashamed to tell me? Were they involved in something illegal? Was there another person? I felt sick with worry, but also with guilt. How could I have missed all this? How could I have been so blind? The next morning, I watched Jamie go through the motions, shower, dress, pack a lunch. I watched them get in the car, back out of the driveway, and drive off. But instead of going to work, they circled the block and parked at the end of the street. I watched from the window, heart pounding, as Jamie just sat there in the car, staring at the dashboard. After about 20 minutes, they drove off again, but not toward their office. I followed, keeping a safe distance. Jamie drove to a nearby park, parked under a tree, and just sat there. 4 hours. I went home, numb. When Jamie came back that evening, I pretended everything was normal. I wanted to confront them, to demand answers, but I was terrified of what I'd hear. That night, I lay awake, listening to Jamie's breathing beside me, wondering who this person really was. The trust I'd always felt was gone, replaced by a gnawing dread. The next few days were a blur. I watched Jamie repeat the same routine, leaving for work, driving to the park, sitting alone, coming home at the usual time. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. Was Jamie depressed? Hiding something? Planning to leave me? Every scenario felt worse than the last. I finally broke down and called Jamie's office, pretending to be a client. The receptionist told me Jamie hadn't worked there in over 2 years. She sounded surprised, almost apologetic, like she knew she was dropping a bombshell. I hung up, hands shaking, and sat in the kitchen for what felt like hours. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, was unraveling. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run away, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring at the wall, trying to process what I'd learned. When Jamie came home that night, I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. I had to ask. I had to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. But nothing could have prepared me for what Jamie was about to say. I sat at the kitchen table, hands clenched around a mug of cold tea I'd made hours ago and forgotten about. Jamie came in, humming softly, dropping their keys in the same spot as always. For a moment, everything looked so normal it almost hurt. The faint smile, the casual, "Hey, babe," the way Jamie glanced at me with those familiar eyes. But I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending. "Jamie," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We need to talk." Jamie paused, smile fading. They looked at me for a long second, searching my face for clues. I saw something flicker in their eyes, fear, maybe, or resignation. They sat down across from me, folding their hands neatly on the table. "What's going on?" Jamie asked, trying to sound casual. But I could hear the tremor in their voice. I took a deep breath. "I know you haven't been going to work. I know you haven't worked at the company for over 2 years." The silence that followed was deafening. Jamie didn't even try to deny it. They just stared at their hands, shoulders slumping as if a huge weight had finally landed on them. "How did you find out?" Jamie's voice was so small, so fragile, I barely recognized it. "I told them everything, the pay stubs, the bank statements, the receptionist, the morning spent watching them drive away and park at the end of the street." As I talked, Jamie's eyes filled with tears. They didn't interrupt, just listened, nodding occasionally, as if they'd been expecting this moment. When I finished, the room felt impossibly heavy. I waited for Jamie to explain, to offer some kind of reason that would make sense of all this. Instead, Jamie just whispered, "I'm sorry." I felt my own tears start to fall. "Why, Jamie? Why would you do this? Why didn't you tell me?" Jamie wiped their eyes, took a shaky breath, and finally began to talk. "It started when the company downsized," Jamie said. "They let a bunch of us go. I was supposed to get another job, but I just couldn't. I tried, at first. I sent out resumes, went to interviews, but nothing worked out. And then it got harder. Every day I didn't tell you, it became harder to admit. I was ashamed. I felt like a failure. I wanted to reach out, to hold Jamie's hand, but I was frozen. My mind raced with 1,000 questions. But why pretend? Why not just tell me the truth? Jamie's face crumpled. Because I didn't want you to see me like this. I thought I could fix it before you found out. I thought I'd get another job and you'd never have to know. But the longer it went on, the worse it got. I started using my savings to cover my share of the bills. I would drive around for hours, sit in the park, just existing. I didn't know how to stop lying. I was so scared you'd hate me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The truth hung between us, raw and ugly. I felt anger, yes, but also a deep, aching sadness. How lonely Jamie must have felt, carrying this secret for so long. How lonely I felt, realizing I'd been living with a stranger. Jamie, I wish you'd told me, I said, my voice breaking. We're supposed to be a team. I could have helped you. Jamie nodded, tears streaming down their face. I know. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to disappoint you. I didn't want you to think less of me. I shook my head, wiping my own tears away. I don't think less of you. But I am hurt. I'm hurt that you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. Jamie reached across the table, their hand trembling. I want to fix this. I want to get help. I can't do this alone anymore. We sat there for a long time, hands clasped, both crying. It wasn't the dramatic confrontation I'd imagined. There was no shouting, no accusations, just two people, broken and scared, trying to find their way back to each other. Over the next few days, we talked more than we had in years. Jamie told me about the depression, the anxiety, the shame that had built up inside them like a wall. I told Jamie about my own fears, of losing them, of being lied to, of not knowing how to help. We agreed to see a counselor, both together and separately. It wasn't a magical fix, but it was a start. I learned how easy it is to drift apart, even when you're living under the same roof. How secrets can grow in the dark, feeding on silence and shame. But I also learned how powerful honesty can be, even when it hurts. How forgiveness isn't a single moment, but a choice you make every day. We have a long road ahead. There are still days when I wake up and wonder if I'll ever trust Jamie the same way again. But there are also days when I see the person I fell in love with, the person who's trying, who's fighting, who's finally letting me in. I don't know how this story will end. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like we're writing it together. Perhaps the hardest part after the truth came out wasn't the anger, it was the emptiness, the confusion that settled into our home like a heavy fog. In the first days after our conversation, I felt like I was living in a parallel world. Every morning, I still got up early, made coffee, and watched Jamie sit quietly at the kitchen table. There was no more frantic pretending, no rushed goodbyes at the door, no familiar sound of the car starting at 8:15. Instead, there was a silence that stretched between us, sometimes so suffocating that I'd have to step outside just to breathe. We started couples counseling every Tuesday. The first session was awkward. Jamie mostly stared at their hands, fingers twisting nervously, while I struggled to find words. I didn't know where to start. But somehow, having a third person in the room, a calm, patient presence, made it easier to say things aloud. The therapist asked questions neither of us had thought to ask each other. She didn't judge, didn't take sides. She just listened, and slowly, we began to talk. Jamie admitted that every day spent pretending was like carrying a stone in their chest. That the shame had grown so big it felt impossible to speak. That they'd convinced themselves I would leave if I knew the truth. Hearing Jamie say these things out loud broke my heart all over again, but it also opened a door. For the first time, I realized how much pain Jamie had been in, not just because of losing their job, but because of the lie itself, and the loneliness it created. I confessed my own pain, too. How I'd felt betrayed, how my sense of reality had been shaken. How I'd started doubting not just Jamie, but myself, my instincts, my ability to see the person I loved. The therapist reminded us that trust, once broken, doesn't come back all at once. It has to be rebuilt, piece by piece, with patience and honesty. The days blurred together. Some mornings, Jamie would wake up and seem almost like their old self, making jokes, offering to cook breakfast. Other days, they barely got out of bed. I tried to be patient, but sometimes I snapped, over small things, like dishes in the sink or missed appointments. Guilt would wash over me afterward, but I was learning that healing isn't linear. Some days you move forward, some days you fall back. One evening, about a month after everything came out, Jamie handed me a notebook. I started writing, they said quietly. Just, thoughts. Things I'm afraid to say out loud. Would you read it? I sat on the couch, notebook in hand, heart pounding. Jamie left the room, giving me privacy. The pages were filled with messy handwriting, crossed out words, and raw honesty. Jamie wrote about feeling useless, about the fear of being a disappointment, about how every day the lie grew, it felt harder to come clean. There were pages about me, too, about how much Jamie loved me, how they hated hurting me, how they wished they could go back and make different choices. By the time I finished reading, I was crying. Not just because of the pain, but because of the vulnerability. For the first time, I felt like I could see Jamie, not just the person who lied, but the person who was hurting, scared, and desperately trying to make things right. That night, we talked for hours. We made a promise, no more secrets, no matter how hard the truth might be. We agreed to check in with each other every day, even if it was just to say, I'm struggling today. We started making small plans. Jamie would look for part-time work, something low pressure to start rebuilding confidence. I would try to let go of the need to control everything, to trust that healing would take time. It's not a perfect process. There are still days when I look at Jamie and wonder if I'll ever fully trust them again. There are days when Jamie withdraws, when the shame creeps back in. But there are also moments of real connection, shared laughter, quiet walks in the park, nights spent talking until we fall asleep. Sometimes I think about those 2 years, how close we were, yet how far apart. I wonder what would have happened if I'd noticed sooner, or if Jamie had found the courage to tell me earlier. But I'm learning to let go of the what-ifs. All we can do is move forward, one honest conversation at a time. I don't know what the future holds for us. Maybe our marriage will come out stronger, maybe it won't. But for now, we're both here. We're both trying. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough. It's been almost a year since the day I found out the truth about Jamie. Sometimes, it feels like it happened to someone else, a story I read online, not a chapter of my own life. But then there are moments, quiet and sharp, when the memory returns with all its weight, the shock, the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the slow, uncertain steps toward healing. Looking back, I realized that the hardest part wasn't just discovering the lie. It was facing the silence that had grown between us, the years of unspoken fears and mounting shame. For so long, I believed that love was enough, that as long as you cared for someone, everything else would fall into place. But love, I've learned, isn't just the good days or the easy answers. Sometimes it's showing up when everything feels broken, when you don't know how to move forward, but you're willing to try. After that night, the night Jamie gave me the notebook, and we finally talked honestly, we both changed in ways I couldn't have predicted. Jamie started therapy on their own, working through the depression and anxiety that had haunted them for years. It wasn't easy. Some weeks, just getting out of bed was a victory. But little by little, I saw pieces of the person I fell in love with resurface, the dry humor, the gentle touch, the quiet determination. I had to do my own work, too. I went to therapy, not just for us, but for myself. I needed to understand why I'd missed the signs, why I'd clung so tightly to routine that I failed to see what was happening right in front of me. I learned that trust isn't a guarantee, it's a living thing, something you nurture with honesty, vulnerability, and forgiveness. I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, or pretending the pain never happened. It means choosing, day after day, to believe in the possibility of something better. We set new boundaries, new routines. Jamie found a part-time job at a local bookstore, a small step, but one that brought a spark back into their eyes. They started to talk about their days again, sometimes with frustration, sometimes with excitement. I listened, really listened, and tried to meet Jamie where they were, not where I wished they'd be. There were setbacks. There were nights when old wounds reopened, when trust felt fragile and I wondered if we'd ever truly recover. But there were also small victories, a shared laugh over morning coffee, a long walk in the park, a quiet evening spent reading side by side. We learned to check in with each other, to say, "I'm struggling," without fear of judgment. We learned that it was okay to ask for help. Our friends and family eventually found out, in bits and pieces. Some were supportive, others were confused, even judgmental. I lost a few friendships along the way, people who couldn't understand why I stayed, or who thought forgiveness was weakness. But I also found new strength in the people who stood by us, who reminded me that everyone makes mistakes, and that healing is possible, even after the deepest cuts. The biggest lesson, maybe, is that life rarely goes according to plan. We spend so much time building routines, dreaming about the future, convinced that if we just work hard enough and love deeply enough, nothing will go wrong. But life isn't a straight line. It's messy and unpredictable. Sometimes, the person you trust most lets you down, not because they don't love you, but because they're human, and they're scared, and they don't know how to ask for help. Would I do it all over again? If you'd asked me a year ago, I might have said no. The pain was too raw, the betrayal too deep. But now, standing on the other side, I see things differently. I see the ways we both grew, the ways we learned to be honest, not just with each other, but with ourselves. I see the cracks in our relationship, not as signs of failure, but as places where light can get in. Jamie and I are still together. We're not the same people we were before, and maybe that's a good thing. Our marriage isn't perfect, no marriage is, but it's real. It's honest. We argue, we laugh, we cry, and we keep choosing each other, day after day. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe we'll make it. Maybe we won't. But I know that whatever happens, I'll face it with open eyes and an open heart. Sometimes, I still think about those 2 years, the mornings Jamie pretended to leave for work, the afternoons spent alone in the park, the lies that grew heavier with every passing day. I wonder how things might have been different if Jamie had told me the truth from the start, or if I'd noticed sooner. But I try not to dwell on the past. We can't change what happened. All we can do is learn from it and move forward. If you're reading this, maybe you're going through something similar. Maybe you've been lied to, or maybe you're the one hiding the truth. I won't pretend to have all the answers. But I do know this: secrets have a way of growing in the dark, feeding on fear and shame. The only way to break their hold is to bring them into the light, to speak honestly, even when it hurts, even when you're terrified of what might happen next. There's no guarantee that things will work out. Sometimes, honesty leads to heartbreak. But sometimes, it leads to healing. Sometimes, it gives you a chance to rebuild, not the life you thought you wanted, but the one you actually need. Jamie and I are still writing our story. It's messier than I ever imagined, but it's ours. And for now, that's enough.